Well, we are having some technical difficulties, but hopefully we're on the air. If some of you didn't catch that initial answer, it is he who thinks great thoughts often makes great errors. And I was trying to put that up here on the screen, and it wasn't allowing me to do it. Let me give it another shot. Success. And I understand we're not live on all platforms tonight. I'm not sure what's going on, but for some reason we couldn't get logged in. I think it's to LinkedIn, so hopefully we're streaming just fine through Twitter and YouTube and Facebook. I guess we'll learn that after the fact. But what's the proper question here? Who thinks great thoughts often makes great errors? And the clock is counting down to 0. And the proper response is, who is Martin Heidegger? He was known as a existential philosopher, also phenomenologist, but he emphasized that risk of failure is just a necessary part of pursuing big ideas and big success. And why do a lot of people never reach that big success or have those really big ideas? Well, you're going to have to risk coming up with some duds to get those big booming rocket ship successes, and that's just a part of it. Let's go back to the board and pick our next item here, and it's going to come from Creature Feature. Oh, and that is our T-ball triple of the day. I will put this up on the board, and we will take a quick break and be back right after this. There we go. Stick around. We'll be back.
If you are a fellow human struggling with difficult emotions, a fracturing relationship, parenting problem, mental health difficulty, have a psychotherapy from hell story to tell, or a challenging life experience question, and would like to share your story by stepping up to bat as a T-baller, either register by texting Q.i.Q to 1-870-686-4196 and join our Therapy Bites community, or send a postcard with your name, address, phone number, email address, and age to the address on the screen. Therapy Bites, Q.i.Q, P.O. Box 1391, Jonesboro, Arkansas, 72403-1391.
And hopefully we've had enough time for coming up with a proper response there. I will go and put that up on the board because I think it's such a interesting one. What is the cognitive distortion where individuals dismiss positive experiences, insisting that they don't count, and therefore they'll maintain a negative belief despite evidence to the contrary? And don't we all do that? We have all these wonderful things that we're good at. Hopefully I have a few. You probably have a lot more than I do. But let's take that one mistake or that one misstep or that one kerfuffle, and we were zoom in on that and hyper focus on the negative and disqualify the positive. And the reason we call that a gray herring, the reason I was making sure my mute is off, that would have been a kerfuffle that I often commit. The reason we call that a gray herring is it misdirects your thinking. Brain cell bodies are gray, and in logic those are called red herrings, but here in the art lab we call that a gray herring because it is a misdirection of your thinking. Make a list of the things you're good at. Your brain is automatically going to pick up the negatives and the downside. We need to remind ourselves of all the things that can lift us up. Let's go back to the board and pick the next item, which is going to come from social media smackdown. I'll put that up on the board, and I'm sure this won't be too hard. We've talked about it quite a bit. I'll go to the timer window. The myth that blank are always shy and blank are always outgoing. And this has been around for a long, long time. It's a way of classifying people, but you know, the problem is putting people in a box. People may be a certain way in only certain situations. People tend to change a little bit from relationship to relationship. For instance, they may be very outgoing if they're with a really close friend or family member, or if they're with a group of peers. They may not be very outgoing at all. I don't want to give away the response till we get to the end of the timer. But don't assume that because someone is a certain way in one scenario, they're always going to be that way. People are not static. People are dynamic. And the proper response is, what is a commonly misunderstood concept about personal media types shared on social media about introversion and extroversion? Introversion and extroversion is about energy source based on thought processes. Why is that? Well, because if I'm around a group of very close family members that know who I am and they were raised with me, I may, based on my thought processes, produce enough energy to be outgoing. If I'm around a lot of peers and other professionals and I have distorted thinking about myself and my skill set, then I may be very introverted. So it's a myth that people that are introverted are never extroverted, and that people that are very extroverted are never introverted, because that's a very dynamic back and forth process. Let's go back to the board, and the next item here is going to come from fresh from the therapy couch. And oh my goodness, I don't want to give this away. I'll save it. But I think when you learn what the question is, it'll make perfect sense. I'll pop it up. We'll do a quick break and be back after this.
If you plan on being in the local area of your podcast player app and would like complimentary tickets to the TherapyBites Q.i.Q Art Lab studio audience, please search TherapyBites on your device and just smash that subscribe button. Your complimentary ticket grants you access to alerts so you'll never miss a show.
And sometimes people say, Doc, why do you take these breaks? Well, we like to give out some information about the show, and it also gives me time to take a sip of coffee, which I do frequently throughout the day. This is a common part of the human condition. I'll put it up on the screen. My apologies. It was in the chat. It's a belief where we may think that we don't measure up and we don't have what it takes, or that we may lack value. And the proper response is, what is self-worth? Self-worth is a fuel tank that only you can fill. Don't go to someone else to put fuel in your fuel tank of self-worth. You might say, well, gosh, how do we do that? You do that by looking at your skill set and recognizing what you're talented at, and we all have a talent, and you realize that as a human, you had self-worth from the very first glimmer of your existence. Let's go back to the board and grab the next item here, and it's going to come from Psych Secrets, and I will put it in the chat there and give you about 60 seconds while I chatter so that you could take a look at this. I will pull it up on the board, and this is our timer window. Thank you guys for joining us this evening. It's always a pleasure. And this item is, the answer is, the term for the process by which new neurons are formed in the brain. And that's right. New brain cells are formed all the time, and this kind of debunks the belief that we're born with a fixed number of neurons that declines with age. Yes, neurons can die, neurons can be pruned, can be reassigned, they can be damaged, but the brain is always manufacturing new, make sure my mute's off again, the brain is always manufacturing new neurons, and most notably in the hippocampus, which really kind of looks like two seahorses put together. If you look at you Star Trek fans, it looks like a Romulan warbird or something like that, a spaceship. But what is this called? Oh, we don't have answers yet. It's called, what is neurogenesis? Neurogenesis is the forming of new neurons. Let's go back to the board. We have time for one more, and it's going to come from Couch Crumbs. My goodness, we've not had one of those. It is for 200 Psy coins. And remember that you can watch this in the replay if you didn't have time to stick around. I will put this in the chat. We'll have one more quick break and be back with our final response after this.
Premier accommodations for our T-Ball contributors provided electronically by the luxurious Art Lab Studio, overlooking the steaming cesspool of pseudo-psychological social media psychomalarkey and located in cyberspace on your favorite podcast hosting platform, where we invite you to the most psychomalogically thrilling podcast in town, while you feast on our award-winning psychologically nutritious buffet of TherapyBites cuisine, conscientiously cooked up by your hard-working T-Ball team chefs.
And once again, thanks for being here. Let me drag this up on the board, and this is our final item from Couch Crumbs for 200 Psy Coins. This is our mascot clinician who is responsible for his own section of our newsletter, and he leads the charge against, as we say, social media pseudo-psychological mumbo-jumbo. And since I don't have a respondent, I'm going to go ahead and put his name up on the board since he does such great work. Whoops, let me try again. And he is none other than, guess what? Dr. Ima Freudnot. Dr. Ima Freudnot. Do I lack self-worth? Do you lack self-worth? I'm a Freudnot. Go out there this evening, make the most of your self-worth, look yourself in the mirror, remind yourself how marvelous you really are. We all have something to contribute. What's next is to decide what you can contribute. Join us again Thursday at 7 o'clock, Chicago, Memphis time, and we'll see you then.
Next time on TherapyBites Art Lab Q.i.Q, Doc Keith and T-Ball callers face off against steaming piles of pseudo-psychological psychomalarkey directly from your favorite social media platforms, or perhaps from the psychotherapy couch of a pill-pushing, emotion-demonizing, bobble-headed, woo-woo clinician who fed their kooky Kool-Aid to you. This is Art Potto speaking. TherapyBites Q.i.Q is a Dr. Ima Freudnot production, distributed by the TherapyBites Art Lab Podcast.